It's no secret that there has been chaos in the upper echelons of Ukraine's military in recent weeks. Former Defense Minister Mykhailo Fedorov is gone. Seemingly ousted after losing a political battle of wills with Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's armed forces Oleksandr Syrskyi. We should say former Commander-in-Chief. Syrskyi is gone too. The victim of backlash over the removal of the popular Fedorov. Putin will have watched all of this with a massive smile on his face, but that smile has been wiped clean off. Following the turmoil comes the turning point. Someone legendary has just taken command of Ukraine's army. He is a legend in battle, Russia's worst nightmare, and he has arrived to lead Ukraine in the breaking of the Russian war machine. Putin should be very worried. We're going to explain why. On July 24th, it was all made official. The new Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's armed forces, Mykhailo Drapatyi, was presented to the world. He spoke of the challenge that lies ahead, not just for him but for all of Ukraine, as it works to repel Putin's invasion, which is now deep into its fifth year. Drapatyi called for unity across all aspects of the military and declared that he would work for results rather than politics. Drapatyi also listed 4 priorities, which include building up Ukraine's air defenses, increasing the country's lethality against Russia, developing and scaling the unmanned component of Ukraine's armed forces, and cutting through all unnecessary bureaucracy. That all sounds very Fedorov-like to us. And as we'll discuss soon, that may mean Ukraine's ousted defense minister could have a path back to his previous position. But for now, this is about Drapatyi. We told you that he is a nightmare for Russia, and to understand why, we take you to the southeastern city of Mariupol. In May 2014, pro-Russian separatists had built a barricade to prevent Ukraine's army from regaining control over the city. That barricade failed. The reason was that an armored vehicle smashed through it at a crazy speed, punching a hole through what the separatists had built. That hole allowed another armored vehicle to follow, and the soldiers inside went on to save the lives of police officers whom the separatists were holding hostage in Mariupol's Interior Ministry building. One of the men driving in that vehicle that smashed through the barricade was Mykhailo Drapatyi. In one incident, Drapatyi became a hero. The video of his exploits spread all over social media as the young soldier received acclaim for somehow leading his unit from a hopeless situation into a victorious one. Of course, one viral act of heroism doesn't amount to a qualification for Ukraine's commander-in-chief. However, what Drapatyi's exploits in 2014 showed Ukraine was that he is a man who takes situations by the scruff of the neck. Uninterested in holding back, he fights to win. Ukraine needs that right now, and its soldiers are delighted at the recent appointment. "There's no better person for this position nowadays in Ukraine," one soldier told the BBC, hinting that Drapatyi is a lot more than one video of him smashing a barricade with an armored vehicle. Another unnamed officer who spoke about the new commander-in-chief back in June 2025 said, "Drapatyi is a relatively young general. He is gifted. He was always sent to places where the situation was extremely difficult." Yet another soldier, Artem Karyakin, tells the Kyiv Independent, "Drapatyi commands tremendous respect within the Ukrainian military, something that is extremely difficult to earn." There is clearly a lot more to this young general than one video suggests, but perhaps the best way to gauge how important this new appointment will be for Ukraine comes from the reactions of the Russian occupiers once they heard the news. Russians are raging. They know that Drapatyi is a very dangerous man. A July 22nd report in the Kyiv Independent ahead of the general's official unveiling highlights that. Russian military blogger Kirill Fedorov, who has 500,000 subscribers to his Telegram channel, was quick to sound the alarm as he shared the now famous video of the armored vehicle. "He hates us, and he hates us consistently. That means he will try to kill us, regardless of any moral constraints," Fedorov opined, suggesting that Drapatyi is a man who will show no mercy to Russian occupiers. Others have pointed to Drapatyi's age as a concern. He is 43 years old and has risen through the ranks of Ukraine's military, starting the war as a battalion commander, another blogger pointed out, noting that this is very bad news for Russia. It means that Drapatyi has seen the front lines, knows what is needed and, unlike his predecessor, is schooled in the modern way of war rather than Soviet-era combat. The general consensus seems to be that Drapatyi will loosen the constraints on Ukraine's armed forces, especially its unmanned units. And if that happens, it would be disastrous for Russian troops on the ground. At least, that's what the Russians are saying. But behind all of the bluster, the viral videos, and the Russian fear, the questions have to be asked. Who is Mykhailo Drapatyi really? And is he the man who can lead Ukraine to victory over Russia? Starting with the first of those questions, the one thing we know for sure is that Drapatyi is very different from his predecessor, Oleksandr Syrskyi. Though only separated by 17 years, these two men come from very different schools of military thought. Syrskyi has been important to Ukraine. The four-star general's tactics were key during Russia's attempt to overrun Kyiv in early 2022, as it was due to him that Ukraine was able to outmaneuver the mechanized columns that Putin sent toward the city. Syrskyi is also credited as being the mind behind Ukraine's counter-invasion of Kursk in August 2024, which put Putin in a terrible position by exposing Russia's supposed great protector as a man who would allow the first invasion onto Russian soil since World War II. However, Syrskyi also conducted war in an increasingly old-fashioned way. Schooled in the 1980s at the Moscow Military Academy, and once thought to be one of Russia's upcoming top commanders before the Soviet Union collapsed, Syrskyi never quite escaped the Russian way of thinking about war. His own soldiers respected and feared him in equal measure, naming him the Butcher because of his seeming indifference to human losses. That attitude might fly in Russia, but in Ukraine, which has a far smaller population and faces an enemy that can outnumber it, a butcher may not be the right person for the job. Ukraine has developed a new way of war over the last 4.5 years. Many in the country's military believe that this means Syrskyi and his tactics have become outdated. By contrast, Drapatyi represents the new school of Ukrainian military thinking. Free from the Soviet shackles, he brings a combination of Western thought and Ukraine's own drone-heavy strategy. He is also far more than the man who commanded the vehicle that smashed through a barricade in Mariupol. The BBC reports that he returned to university in 2021 for further strategic and operational training, being presented with a Sword of Honor as the university's top student upon his graduation. In the war with Russia, Drapatyi has led several operational groups, achieving success in Kherson and Dnipropetrovsk, where his groups have liberated several settlements, in addition to Kryvyi Rih, where he and his soldiers were able to push back Russian occupiers. In more recent years, Drapatyi has served as the commander of Ukraine's joint forces, and it's in this position where tensions between him and Syrskyi are rumored to have arisen. Like Fedorov, Drapatyi wants Ukraine to fight a new kind of war that is somewhat alien to Syrskyi and his Soviet-trained approach. A war that Ukraine can actually win. Some point to Syrskyi as a man who knows how to defend, but also as a man who lacks future vision. Even as Ukraine's drones score more kills than ever, Syrskyi still sticks to what he was taught. Lacking a vision for victory wasn't a bad thing in the early years of the war, when the goal seemed to be to defend long enough for Russia to decide that taking Ukraine was more trouble than it was worth. But it's 2026. Putin has long proven that he has no intention of stopping. No matter how much of Russia's military crumbles, Ukraine can no longer afford to sustain and survive. It has to win. The appointment of Drapatyi is in service of getting that win. None of this is to disparage Syrskyi for the vital role that he has played in getting Ukraine this far. And in his final remarks as Ukraine's commander-in-chief, Syrskyi was both diplomatic and forthright in his view of himself and the army he leaves behind. I'm handing over to my successor an army that is not only holding the line, but is in a state of offense, with initiative, with structure, with people who know how to strike the enemy, and I sincerely hope that this offensive will continue. Everything needed for that is there, Syrskyi said before adding, I said this before, and I repeat it today. My job is war. Positions change, but this principle does not. In whatever status I may be, I will serve Ukraine until victory. The handover has happened, and Syrskyi appears to be willing to allow himself to fade into the background, allowing for a smooth transition. That's a huge positive for Drapatyi as he starts his new role. However, despite seeming qualified and having enough about him to cause fear in the Russian ranks, the question of how much of a difference Drapatyi can make has to be asked. His appointment caught everybody off guard, but what he will do for Ukraine's military is the real game changer. Drapatyi has the potential to be the man who leads Ukraine in the breaking of Putin's war machine. But before we explain why, you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the perfect time to do it. And if you want to see our videos as soon as they are published, remember to enable notifications. There's one thing, above all others, that Drapatyi brings to Ukraine's military: hope. We see that in the words of the soldiers set to serve under him, who point out that Drapatyi is part of a new generation of officers who developed during the war. Former Defense Minister Mykhailo Fedorov also inspired similar hope. We see that in the outpouring of anger in Ukrainian streets upon his dismissal, as protests called out Ukrainian high command for seemingly trying to get rid of young officers who want to combat corruption and tackle the layers of bureaucracy that exist in Ukraine's military. Drapatyi brings with him the same promise of change that Fedorov wanted to deliver. He brings hope to Ukraine's military. Don't underestimate the power of hope, especially now when Ukraine's army, though effective, is struggling with various morale and manpower challenges. During the winter, Ukraine experienced one of its most challenging periods yet. A massive bombardment of its energy infrastructure left civilians shivering in the cold as heat went out. Many others lost access to power and water. At one point, 70% of Kyiv found itself without power, as temperatures plunged as low as minus 20 degrees Celsius. This is all by Russian design: terrorize Ukraine's people, and they will eventually grow so tired of the war that they will submit to Putin's whims. That's the approach, at least. Though Ukraine has done well to recover, it also has a manpower crisis that has emerged in large part because potential soldiers are terrified of dying on the front lines. In January, the Tactics Institute for Security and Counterterrorism reported that an estimated 200,000 Ukrainian soldiers were absent without leave, and a further 2 million citizens are wanted for evading mandatory military service. The patriotic mobilization that had served Ukraine for so long has started to wear thin. Going up against an enemy that has a population that is 4 times the size of Ukraine's could be a killer. Syrskyi's reputation as the butcher may have played a part. It may not be that Ukrainians don't want to fight, it's perhaps more that they don't want to be sent into assaults when they have seen that drones, ground robots and other technology can be much more effective. This is somewhat speculative, but it's notable that many of those who've worked with Drapatyi say that he takes a different approach. One of those soldiers, Colonel Oleksandr, tells Pravda, Drapatyi never set pointless tasks. When he listened to commanders' reports while planning operations, he always looked for ways to get the job done with the fewest possible casualties. Therein lies the hope. If Drapatyi can deliver the same kind of approach across all of Ukraine's military, the hope is that he will achieve the same or better results than Syrskyi with a lower casualty count. And if he can prove himself as a man who cares about the soldiers under his command, the hope is that he can also encourage those who may have once evaded their call-ups to join the military and fight. Still, all of this is easier said than done. Hope alone doesn't win a war. What Drapatyi needs to do now is deliver on the promises that he made when he was unveiled as Ukraine's new commander-in-chief. He has near-universal support from the people and the army. He is also noted as a critic of Soviet-style thinking, being an early adapter of the drone warfare that has served Ukraine so well in the defense against Russia. As The Guardian points out, Drapatyi represents a break, not only from Soviet-style tactics but also the Soviet-style command structures that still pervade Ukraine's military. That's where his focus will likely lie in the coming months, dismantling those old structures and replacing them with newer ones, in which junior officers are given responsibility and expected to answer for their actions. A somewhat decentralizing of command, showcasing trust and a lack of micromanagement, may be what Drapatyi delivers to Ukraine's command structures. How long that change will take to arrive is yet to be seen. It certainly won't be immediate. Drapatyi is expected to improve battlefield management and the Ukrainian army's day-to-day functioning, but his wider challenge of altering command structures could take months or even years to solve. Still, Drapatyi is a man who seems willing to solve those challenges, and that's what really worries Russia. Despite Ukraine's drone advances, Russia could somewhat trust that Ukraine would fight in a way that suited its type of war. Syrskyi was a product of Moscow's military academies after all. That made him a man who could be predicted to a certain extent. Drapatyi isn't the same kind of leader. He is very different, and he's not a man that Russia can easily get a bead on, which makes him a nightmare. In Drapatyi, Ukraine has somebody who is a proponent of the modern style of warfare that has allowed the country to achieve so many positive results, especially in 2026. Combine that with his real combat experience of having served on the front lines in Ukraine, and Drapatyi could be the man to bring about the change informed by what Ukraine's soldiers really need: innovation and constant adaptability. Plus, if Drapatyi can smooth over the conflicts that have started to appear between Ukraine's army and its Ministry of Defense, that will be a massive bonus. And that, interestingly, brings us right back to the man who we mentioned at the start of the video, Mykhailo Fedorov. We mentioned earlier that Drapatyi and Fedorov's goals for the Ukrainian military seem to align. The uproar over the loss of Fedorov also won't have escaped Drapatyi's attention, nor that of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Could the appointment of Drapatyi pave the way for Fedorov to return to the role from which he was removed just a few weeks ago? It's possible. Ukraine still hasn't named a permanent defense minister in the wake of Fedorov's ousting. Former spy chief Yevgeny Kamara currently holds the position. though in an interim capacity as Ukraine's parliament prepares to vote on a replacement. Maybe a replacement isn't needed. With Syrskyi gone, Fedorov's name may be back in the hat. Fedorov himself says that he has been offered other positions by Zelensky, but he refuses to take them as he believes that there are only 3 positions where true change can be effected in Ukraine's army. 2 of those positions, President and Commander-in-Chief, are filled. The other is the role that Fedorov served just a few weeks ago, Defense Minister. Fedorov has even refused the role of Deputy Prime Minister, demonstrating his conviction to what he sees as an important cause. Drapatyi also seems to be a supporter of Fedorov. When Fedorov and Syrskyi began to clash earlier in July, Drapatyi came out in support of Fedorov, calling him a partner to the armed forces within the Defense Ministry, and a person who not only meets our needs but also pushed for changes in approach, faster decision-making, and support for those willing to take responsibility for those decisions. Fedorov seems to return the sentiment, having thrown his support behind Drapatyi during meetings with Zelensky, where Pravda reports he argued for Drapatyi to receive the job that he now has. We see a certain synergy here, a great potential for Ukraine's military and Ministry of Defense to coordinate better than it ever has before. The barrier in place may be Zelensky himself. Would he be willing to swallow his pride and reinstate Fedorov? The ousting of Syrskyi suggests that he might, and of course, all of this is speculative. However, it wouldn't surprise us if we saw the return of Fedorov, hailing the beginning of a period of transformation for Ukraine that sees it finally loosen itself from the last of the shackles of its Soviet past. Whatever happens next, Drapatyi needs to work fast. September is quickly approaching, and though Ukraine has done an excellent job of repelling the spring and summer offensive that Russia launched in 2026, more is coming when the fall arrives. There is word of a September offensive to come. There are also rumors that the fall may be when Putin is finally forced to bite the bullet and force mobilization onto his people. Zelensky warned of that on July 24th, saying that Putin is likely to institute a broad wave of mobilization following Russian parliamentary elections in September. Putin is going to expand this war. He needs more Russians to take part in assaults. We have intelligence that Russia is preparing a significant mobilization this fall, Zelensky declared in his daily evening address. If that's the case, then the hero that Ukraine has just made its commander-in-chief needs to act fast. The happiness and hope that surround his appointment are finite. What Ukraine really needs are results, and Drapatyi has to deliver. The man who became a legend in battle must now establish himself as the nightmare that Ukraine's army hopes that he will be for Russia. If anybody has that ability, it seems to be Drapatyi. The next couple of months will be crucial. They could make or break either Ukraine or Russia. One region that will be an immediate focus for Ukraine's new commander-in-chief is Konstantinivka. Russia has claimed it took the key fortress belt city. It didn't, nowhere near. Instead, Ukraine lured Russian troops into a genius trap in the city, and it caused massive casualties by springing that trap. This is the type of operation that Drapatyi needs to build upon, and you can find out all about it by watching our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show and ring the notification bell to see more of our videos charting the changes inside Ukraine's military. And thank you, as always, for watching.